just to mention the women who have touched my life so far, that is. Quite a number of whom I have a deep love and affection for. Others somewhat differently. Yet, for the time that I knew them, certainly they affected my life. Well, to begin with, my mother, Yvonne ní Hennessy Power, as I've mentioned, my birth was a difficult one, and having been born within 4 days of my elder brother Paul's first birthday, it was felt by my mother that she wasn't ready to have me at the time when she did. Now, as mothers go, my mother was a very disciplined woman, bringing up her children, and it can be said that as young children, if we were naughty, it was nothing for my mother to bring out the wooden spoon to us. To put us in our place. As well as some heavy-handed words to sort us out. And yet, my mother is a very reserved woman, having come from a very reserved family. I was often told the story that when my mother and her siblings were growing up in John Street, in a big townhouse in Cashel, that if ever any of my mother's schoolhood friends came to the front door, Mrs. Hennessy, my grandmother, Lillian, would open the door almost a crack and look out, asking, well, hello, what is it you want? And the children would peer in, inquiring if Yvonne was there. Could Yvonne come out to play? And the answer was no. And Granny, my grandmother on my father's side, often told me that my other Granny Hatch, Mrs. Hennessy that is, would often have us on her knee, and yet she felt uncomfortable at that. Whereas Granny, Mary Power that is, was open-armed with all her grandchildren. And even with the breakdown of my mother's marriage, she actually chose to remain single afterwards. And yet, she has battled on, as she would say, ever since, maintaining the home at Barnawee. And she's a great woman for doing so. And this year, she's 75 and in great health, thank God. Now, secondly, Mary Power, my grandmother, was a huge influence in my life while she was still alive. And I knew her quite well in the last 20 years of her life, before she died almost 91 years of age in 2001. Mary, my grandmother, came from a professional family. Her father, John Christopher, was a businessman in the town of Dungarvan. And they lived in a big house in Church Street in Dungarvan. As I said, I knew my granny very well in the last 20 years of her life. Thank God. Yet there was a time when my father quarrelled with his father, Paul I. Power, my grandfather, and we didn't often see my grandparents at Land's End during that period. Yet, thank God, both men made up, and again we were in touch with our grandparents at Land's End. And certainly during my whole time at the high school, St. Augustine's College, my elder brother and I made a point of visiting my grandmother at Land's End after school every afternoon. We'd turn up there on our bicycles and join her in the morning room where we played cards together, the likes of gin rummy, snap, 21, and patience, all card games that my grandmother taught us both, Paul and I. And we loved playing cards with her. She was a great card player, again playing poker herself, or bridge should I say. And when we weren't playing cards with Granny, we helped her around the house, or cutting the lawn, the big lawn in front of the house. There was an upper terrace, then the lower lawn, which was vast, and at the side of the house, grass in by the rose garden, which had a moon gate leading into what used to be a fruit and vegetable garden. This is at Land's End. And Paul and I would always accompany Granny on her walks with the dog in Colligan Woods. And these visits by Paul and I were highly discouraged by my mother, who felt, yes, we shouldn't be doing so. And yet we continued to visit my grandmother. And it was only for a couple of hours before Paul and I returned to the early study period at the college, where we joined the boarders at their supervised study periods, which in the very early years when I was at St. Augustine's were held in the classrooms. Yet one summer, Father Hayes, who was Australian, one of the Augustinian priests, who taught metalwork at St. Augustine's College. One summer he made a complete set of huge study table benches, which were set up in the assembly hall at the college, and where study periods were held forevermore, everyone together in the big hall and supervised at that. Had anyone misbehaved during study, they were automatically taken out, put out from study to wait outside in the corridor. And in the early days, we knelt outside in the corridor. And more often than not, the punishment for having been caught disrupting study was to get the leather from the headmaster. Six of the best on the hands, and the headmaster had a thick leather. And certainly my grandmother was a huge influence over my life because of the warmth and love she gave to us. And this is over the love that my mother may have given me. My mother never really bonded with me or was close to me. And that's right up to the present day. Yet, after the divorce my parents went through, I found it very important to stay in touch with my mother. Now, I had one relative who will remain nameless, recommending that, well, if the relationship with my mother wasn't rosy, just to let it go. And I decided, no, I'll keep in touch. And I'm mightily pleased I did forever more to this day. And as mother and son, we get on just fine now. Thirdly, my wife, Maria ni Zambella, who I married in September 1991 in a church wedding in Italy. I can only say of Maria, she was my first true girlfriend, then lover, and eventually wife. And for a number of years, the relationship between us was very rosy and we got on great. And we learned from each other through the good times and the bad, about our mistakes, all our faults together. And I can only say that being with Maria now 25 years, I've learned an awful lot, and I'm a better person for that. Thanks, Maria. And as much as we're not close anymore, I feel the children came between us, and Maria certainly gave a lot of her energy over to the children, and does so to this day. And I don't blame her for that. After all, she is their mother. Yet, I would have felt, as a couple, man and wife that is, we should have maintained our own good relationship to the present day, and yet it has slipped, and the relationship is unretrievable, I believe, at this stage. Talk of counselling and any amount of arguing and all that has gone on never mended the marriage. And I'm sorry for that. I've had people in my life, close family, counselling me, and many is the hour that I have worried, and fretted, and talked about how bad the marriage was going. Yet, I have changed my ways. No more will I fret or worry, or discuss in any big way anything about the marriage, because it's not worth the hassle. And I feel now, at this stage, that we are together, we should stay together for years to come for the sake of the children, and that to live together separately as best we can is the best way forward. And we're doing the best we can at just that. And Bailey would be another woman I would consider a very good friend, and a person who has shown me the true meaning of a platonic relationship between one person and another. And she had that with my father, and likewise with me. And I'm very grateful for that. My daughter Zoe, who's 18 this year, I love her deeply, and I've watched her grow all her life to become a very mature young lady, and she's in the final year at the high school this year and has big plans for next year to spend a year working as a volunteer teaching English in a primary school in India. And at the moment she is fundraising to collect £6,000 to cover the whole expense of being there in India for the year. and she's doing well at that. And a very strong and active and fit woman she is today. She's a black belt in karate. She's in a hip-hop dance group called The Big Deal, and they came 7th out of 48 international groups at a World Dance Championship in Germany a few years ago. Zoe has also spent 5 years at the Anna Ferrantini School of Drama, which she has now left. Yet during the 5 years in the school, they put on 5 consecutive shows at the Hackney Empire Theatre in Hackney every Christmas. And Zoe's first appearance on stage at the Empire was of her doing somersaults onto the stage that first year they performed there. Naturally, Maria and I, and eventually Ryan, went to all those shows, and we attended Zoe's test going for the black belt last year, and her grandmaster came over from Japan and awarded that black belt to Zoe, along with many of the other black belts in the group. Well done to Zoe for that. Eileen O'Mahony, my national school teacher at Clembeg National School, was another great influence in my life, and she was very fond of me, and I of her. And now Eileen is a very good friend of my mother's. Both women living within walking distance of each other's houses. And to mention other women who have touched my life over the years. In the first instance, I believe my first girlfriend ever I had at Killinure Castle, and that was Aisling Murphy, whose family lived in Cappoquin. They had a bacon factory in Cappoquin, and Aisling's parents' names were John and Bernadette Murphy. And it so happened that all the Murphy children, Aisling's siblings, also attended Killinure Castle boarding school with Andrew and Anne Bailey. And I believe Aisling went on to the high school at Newtown School in Waterford at a slightly different time than when I attended Newtown, very briefly. Yet I have not been in touch with Aisling since Killinure Castle and my time there during the 70s, the 1970s, that is. Certainly during my time at the high school, I had a crush, I believe, on the sister of one of my schoolmates. Nicholas Shanahan was his name, and he was originally from America. And the family came back here to Ireland to live in Abbeyside. Nicholas's father taught me the tin whistle while I was at Glenbeg National School. Well, it was Nicholas's sister, Anne Shanahan, I had a mad crush on, and I believe I made it known to people around that that was the case. Yet nothing came of it. And then when I was at Newtown School in Waterford in 1983, I had a crush on a girl. She was possibly in the 6th form when I was in the 5th form, and her name was Teresa Green. And nothing came of that either. And then during my working life here in London, there have been other women who have touched my life. One physically, she was a banker with J.P. Morgan, where I worked as a security officer at Triton Square, just off the Euston Road. And that lady's name was Christina Barker. She was from South America, and I had a mad crush on her. I believe she gave me a kiss once when she was moving office and she was saying goodbye to the team, my colleagues and I. After that, Elle Macpherson, the well-known supermodel and businesswoman in her own right, I have greatly admired throughout the years that she has been a huge success in her life. She's roughly the same age as me, a few months older than me. Her 50th birthday being earlier this year on the 29th of March. And through the internet, on YouTube, I fell madly in love with a girl from America. Fidel Fool was her username on YouTube, and I vividly followed all her videos. She had so much to say, and her influence over me was tremendous. And we actually communicated through YouTube by sending messages to each other. And then she got cold feet of me and put an abrupt end to the communication, which I'm sorry about, and I let her know how I felt, and I believe she got the message. And yet, more recently, Fidel Fool discontinued her account with YouTube. So I can only wish you, Fidel Fool, wherever you are and whoever you are, the very best in life. And I only wish we met. I know you spent time in Ireland and loved Ireland, and I'm sorry we never got the opportunity to meet. It might have worked out between us.